Adele Raemer, welcome to CBN News. We're glad to be here on your kibbutz with you, Kibbutz Nirim. You've spoken to CBN before. Tell us what it's like to be back at your kibbutz 9 months after October 7th.
Thank you for coming down to my kibbutz, which is still a war zone, where we are refugees in our own land. We cannot live here. It's a closed military zone. You have to have identification before you come in, as you saw when you entered. I am with 70% of my community still living in Beersheba for now as an interim solution until we can finally come back home. And I'm doing what I can to raise awareness, to try and raise money so that we could rebuild infrastructure and build new infrastructure that is vital for us to be able to come back and live here with families, with people of all ages, with children, to rebuild it so that people feel safe again, so that people can do activities, so that we can build community, because kibbutz is so much more than just the houses and the dining room and the fields. Kibbutz is community.
Yeah, no, I mean, coming here, it's beautiful. It's quiet. I hear the doves, I hear the birds, and we haven't seen the devastation here yet, but so why is it so hard? What is your communities outside here now? What are some of the challenges you're facing?
So when you live on kibbutz, you don't lock your door. You go outside to the lawn, you see neighbors, you go to the little convenience store. We're 430 people in this community, and I know everybody. So you walk by the children's houses and you see the kids playing outside, and you go to the members' lounge and have a cup of coffee with friends and a jaw. You go have lunch in the dining room and sit with people, and that's building community. We are in Beersheba, spread out over 4 communities. In order for me to get to the communities to the neighborhood where the families with children live, I have to drive 15, 20 minutes. That's something that has to be planned. So kibbutz has always had a cultural infrastructure, planning holidays that we celebrate together, all sorts of events, building a bench or developing a community garden. You know, Saturday morning, 8 o'clock, everybody come over to behind the swimming pool, and we're planting the community garden. So everybody comes and plants and works with. That's something that you can't do as easily when you're spread out over 4 different neighborhoods in an urban setting. I'm living 20 floors above where I'm used to living. There are 15 families, 15 different apartments in the high-rise building where I am now that are Nirim people. And we try and do activities to enable ourselves to get together. Last Friday, I invited anybody in the building from Nirim to come over and have a brunch. So we had a really nice brunch together, and we were able to talk about everything, you know, about regular life. And of course, it always leads back to October 7th and stories of survival, because even though we saw each other on that day, each time I get together with people, I learn new details, learn new facts. I have my October 7th story. Every single family here, every single person here has their own October 7th story, their own story of what they experienced, what they felt, what their fears, how they dealt with it, what happened on that day. Yeah. So there's a lot to talk about, and we don't get to do that enough.
Yeah. So now the people that have been evacuated, so are they the men, the women, are they able to work? Do they have jobs? Are they just kind of sitting at home?
So some of them are able to work. That was one of the reasons why we chose to come to apartments in Beersheba. We could have gone to Netanya, where we would have had 2 high-rise buildings, and the entire kibbutz would have been in these 2 high-rise buildings. But that's a 2.5-hour drive, 2.5-hour drive from Nirim. So people who work in the area, who work on Nirim, wouldn't have been able to get back and work. So that's why we chose Beersheba. We're a 40-minute drive away, and many people work here every day and go back to sleep in Beersheba. There's people who come here and sleep here a few nights a week. It's not easy to sleep here. There are nights when the noise is just unbearable. Right. First of all, we're an agriculturally based community. Okay. And the fields, so the people who work in the fields have been out here working within 3 weeks of October 7th. Our cow, our dairy farm, was the first farm back up and milking our cows within 24 hours.
Oh, wow.
There were terrorists still running around. They were there milking the cows in order to preserve the cows' health.
Yeah, I know we had visited another kibbutz and they couldn't milk the cows for like more than a week, and then the cows were sick and not able to give milk. So that's really something.
It is. There were still terrorists even in the community, and people were milking the cows. They couldn't send the milk anyplace. They had to spill the milk for a few weeks just down the drain because the tankers couldn't come in. Oh. The milk tankers, you know, are these big vehicles that weren't allowed in at the time. But at least, as you say, they were preserving the health of the cows. So there are also people who, a friend of mine, for example, was the medical secretary for Kibbutz Be'eri.
Oh, wow.
They don't have an infirmary, so she's out of work. So there are people who are back working, if they can. There are some people who emotionally aren't capable of working. Tess, whose daughter and husband were murdered on October 7th, isn't capable of going to work, of dealing with that day to day. She's in survival mode, and that's enough work for her at this point in time. So each person is different. There are many jobs that are new jobs on the kibbutz, like in the kibbutz community that didn't exist before, that came to be with us being in an urban setting. For example, there are 2 people who are now in charge of cultural activities. There's people who are on communities that are in charge of rebuilding the kibbutz. That didn't exist before. People who are in jobs that are in charge of communicating with people from the community who are not living with the community. 30% of the community are dispersed in different places around the country. And it's important to preserve those connections.
So now, besides maybe Sderot, almost all of the communities that were heavy hit were either kibbutzim or moshavim, were these tightly knit communities, right?
Yeah, small communities and tightly knit to one extent or another. You know, there are communities that were stronger. There are communities that are weaker. There are a lot of communities that were not as socially strong as we are, resilient as we are, and many of them were falling apart. Wow. And that's just such a tragedy, because when the Hamas came to conquer our communities, they came to take over, to violently overrun our communities. And they managed for a few hours to conquer all of our communities, but we were able to retake it. We were able to reconquer it. We were able to reclaim control of our community. There are communities who, unfortunately, you know, if they fall apart, then that's a win for Hamas. That's a win for our enemies. Yeah. And that will be very bad news.
So what about the kids now going back to school September 1st? They're supposed to start school again. How is that working out?
Very bad, very bad. It's very complicated. It's a big mess. I am no longer connected to the educational framework of the kibbutz, of the region. But from what I'm hearing from friends who are teachers, friends who are parents of kids who are supposed to be going, parents don't know where to sign up their kids because the regional high school and junior high school, it's a 6-year comprehensive school, will be starting in the school. Our 6-year comprehensive school is the first rocket-proof school in the entire world. It was built in 2010. Wow. And they will be coming back. They will be starting and teaching again. We don't know if all the kids are going to be coming back. A lot of the high school kids are old enough to, you know, sort of decide for their families and say, I don't care, I want to go to my school, I want to be with my friends, which is very important. Mm-hmm. To be with your friends, even though you might be in an area that maybe there are nights that it's hard to sleep, and there are fears that you may have here that you won't have in Beersheba or a city farther away from the border, but there's a lot of resilience that you get from your peer group, your group of friends that you can be with.
And they understand each other. They're all going through the same thing,
Yeah,
whether
they
it's the
speak the same
sleepless
language.
nights or whatever, yeah.
Absolutely. The more complicated issue is for the younger kids who are more decided for, whose fates are more decided by their parents. And our school, our educational campus is about 4 kilometers, that's about 2 miles away from the border. Our kibbutz is 1 mile away from the border. There are communities in the region that are affiliated with our educational campus that are 6 kilometers, 10 kilometers away from the border. So parents who have young kids who live 10 kilometers away from the border are saying, I don't want my kids so close to the border in that school, even though the school is totally rocket-proof. People from my community say, well, the kids sleep here. They're here all afternoon, they're here all day, 2 kilometers away. 4 kilometers is already a little bit safer.
And now you've been told, I understand, that you will be allowed to come back to your kibbutz in December. What needs to happen here physically? What needs to happen in the kibbutz before you can move back here?
So first of all, everybody has to have a place to live, which not everybody has now. We'll go for a walk afterwards and see. There's an entire section of the kibbutz, 30 homes, that have to be destroyed. They're set for bulldozing.
Do you have any idea how many want to come back? No.
As of now, the majority are still saying that they want to come back. Okay. I try not to talk to people about it because it's too early, and I don't think it's fair to ask. If it comes up, then I'm happy to discuss it. So I, of course, say, as soon as they tell me I can come back, I'm here. I'm already making plans for renovating my house and making the back porch bigger and changing the windows, but not everybody is at that stage yet where they can say that they're willing to come back. But I was having trouble with one of my fixtures in Beersheba, and there's a person from the kibbutz that you call and say, can somebody come help me with this? And he sends somebody over with his, his drill, and he comes to help. So this is a young guy who's a new member with young children, and we were just chatting, and he brought the issue up, and I said, you're planning on coming back to live on Nirim? He said, we're at least going to try, because if we don't, we'll never forgive ourselves. Wow. So just made my heart sing. Just hearing that was just so
young
encouraging.
Family who'd just been here. I mean, it's gorgeous. Who wouldn't want to live here? It's beautiful. It's but then on the other side of it, and this is not a new thing. I mean, the invasion was, but the rockets. You've been living with this for years and years.
Yeah, yeah. But people. So first of all, every house has a safe room on it. Every structure has a safe room on it. And I never say that you get used to it, but you learn how to deal with it. Children from the age that they can walk know that when they hear that red alert, they know what to do. They know where to go. They know where to run. Crime rate here is 0. Quality of life, when there's no rockets exploding or terrorists invading, is, we call it 95% heaven.
Wow. Yeah.
So in order to come back and live in our 95% heaven, which hopefully will become 100% heaven, people have to have houses. And they're going to be bringing prefab houses for now to put in place so that people who are willing to come back. We're talking about December. That's our goal, to finish the basic reconstruction of what needs to be, what absolutely must be in place for being able to bring the community back by December. Will everything be ready by then? No, but at least the basics. But aside from that, we have plans. We're raising money in order to rebuild our dining room, because the dining room is the hub. It's the heart and soul of a kibbutz. It's a place where everybody can get together and talk, get together for meetings, have Passover seders together, celebrate other holidays together. So it's in a structure that we've been needing to renovate for a while, and we just ran out of money when we started renovating it because we realized that it's on 2 stories and you have to have a big safe room on each floor, because we have people in their 80s and 90s. So if they're upstairs in the dining room and there's a red alert, they won't make it downstairs in time. We need to move our store there because our little convenience store is in a totally unsafe structure. No safe room in there at all. You have to run outside and into an external safe room, which is just unacceptable. We are so close to the border that we have between 0 to 10 seconds. When you hear, from the second you hear the incoming rocket alert to the second you hear the explosion, 0 to 10 seconds to get to someplace safe. So say if there's
almost nothing.
A red alert now, we might make it in to my safe room in time. Not sure. Hopefully there won't be.
Yeah, wow.
But usually what you just heard, that's the sounds that you hear here.
Yeah.
In 95% of the time, in normal times, not during wartime.
I mean,
and today it's been so far pretty quiet.
Yeah.
But there are days that it's very noisy here. And we won't be able to come back until the army says it's safe enough. And we won't be able to come back until you don't have all of the explosions going on the other side. Because you can't bring children that have lived through and are still dealing with trauma to some place where they hear all these explosions all the time that are so close. So it's a process. It's half a year. Hopefully we will get some sort of progress that will enable us to come back home. And of course, our hostages. We have 5 people from this community were abducted. 2 are still there. But we have to get everybody back from Gaza.
Sure.
The living and the dead. The living to be able to heal, and the dead to have a proper Jewish burial. For example, my friend Judy and Gadi, her husband, who are on my dog tags, She's a woman who, they were just out walking in the fields that morning on their sunrise walk and slaughtered. So their family have to get them back here to be able to have some sort of closure, to be able to bury them on Niroz or wherever they decide to bury them. And until they do bring them back, somewhere back in, here, I still keep thinking maybe it's a mistake.
Maybe they're
alive.
Yeah.
They don't have bodies. They weren't with the other people from Niroz. Nobody saw them. Nobody from Niroz saw them. So how they designated that they, her husband, I can understand. He was shot in the head and he was probably dead. When we hear, there's a call that you can hear Judy talking to emergency services, calling for help. And in that call, from her description, you can tell that he's probably dead already. But she was wounded in the hand and the face.
She could be alive.
She could. Wow. So Nir Oz is just a mile away from us. They lost 1 out of every 4. 1 out of every 4 of their people were kidnapped or slaughtered. And from what I have heard in the media, Nirim and Niroz were planned by the same terrorist. Nirim and Niroz were supposed to be the same thing.
Yeah, it's very close. You're very close geographically.
So there were a number of tragedies on Nirim that day, but there were also a number of little miracles that prevented us from being like Niroz.
Can you tell us about some of those?
So, for example, there's footage of terrorists trying to open up our yellow gate on the western side of the kibbutz towards Gaza. And you see that they cannot, because earlier on, a mortar exploded nearby and jammed the gate, so they couldn't open it. That's why they had to cut a hole in the fence further down. The hole that they cut in the fence was big enough to drive through, but there was a concrete
a barrier kind of, or
a concrete base that was holding the wall, the fence, that the cars, when they tried to drive a car over it, it got stuck there. So they couldn't drive out through there. On Nir Oz, they were able to open the back gate, and it was like a highway. They were driving, cars were going, they stole cars and tractors and all sorts of, club cars, golf cart vehicles, and that's how they were able to get so many hostages out from Nir Oz.
Yeah.
Another story that I heard was that in Magen, which is not far from Nir Oz, they weren't able to enter Magen. The Magen first responders team was able to fight them off. So the terrorists that arrived at Magen came to Nir Oz. So they had like
double
the amount. They had even more terrorists that were there than originally planned. There was the whole story of baby Kai, that baby on the window, the 10-day-old baby on the window, which I told in all of my earlier interviews. And the soldiers that arrived here at 1:30 in the afternoon weren't supposed to come here. They were supposed to be going to another kibbutz. But when they heard that there's a 10-day-old baby in a burning house, they said, we got to get to Nirim and save that baby. So that was another little miracle that happened that saved us from being like Nir Oz. Yeah. Nir Oz, they got there afterwards. They got there later on. A tank drove by and just shot off a bunch of shells at terrorists and civilians. It wasn't always only terrorists that were in here. They had a wave of the Nukhba, who were the armed terrorists, but then they called, like, word was sent out in Gaza saying, we've taken over the kibbutzim and the communities. Anybody who wants to, just come in, steal what you want, do whatever damage you want. And they were just your everyday Muhammad on the street from Gaza. You're regular citizens that just flooded into our communities. And they burnt cars, and they took spare tires from cars, put them in houses, put rags and material and furniture and paper on it, poured kerosene over it, and lit a match to burn the houses. The looters and plunderers did probably almost as much damage as the Nukhba, as the armed terrorists.
So now you had relationships with some people, some Gazans before this. How do you think you're going to be able, good relations with them? How will you be able to relate to them, or what do you think needs to happen at this point?
We worked very hard for years. I considered myself a peace activist and worked very hard for many years to build bridges with people on the other side, with Palestinians who live in Judea and Samaria, in the Palestinian territories. Unfortunately, those bridges were not built of steel and iron. They were built of rope, and they unraveled on October 7th. I do not know how I'm going to be able to rebuild those connections. And I was on a Facebook group the other day that's to get Palestinians and Israelis talking. And one of the people there said, we have to have a two-state solution. And I wrote, you know, I would have agreed with you until October 7th. But God forbid there should be a two-state solution now, at this juncture. That would be rewarding terror. And what message is that going to send to all of the terrorists? Because they say, the Hamas says, they don't want a two-state solution. They want it all, from the river to the sea.
Yeah.
That's what they want.
Yeah.
So how can I regain trust?
Yeah.
So I'm sure there are still people, like the people that I was in touch with,
Yeah.
on the other side, that still believe that they can collaborate and cooperate, and that it would be best for their society to build a society that works together with Israel.
Right.
And when I would take groups on tours of Nirim before October 7th, which I did for years, I would always end up at the western gate, the western fence, where we'll get to soon, saying, I am sure that the vast majority of the people on the other side of that border just want the same thing that I do. They want to feed their children and clothe them and get them a good education. On October 7th, I realized that I got my numbers wrong. That it's clearly not the vast majority.
Right.
So, two-state solution, maybe in another generation or two, after the whole ideology of Hamas is wiped out of their educational system, because they teach children to hate. And you just Google these clips and you see kids in Gaza dressed up for their end-of-year party, dressed up as IDF soldiers and Gazan fighters, and the Gazan fighters capture and kill the soldiers. Those are the monsters who are here in my community, just outside my house.
Right.
I heard them. That was them. Something very drastic is going to have to happen in order to re-educate the population of Gaza, the population of the Palestinian territories, to want a state which could be viable and live in peace with the state of Israel, who is here. And we're not going anyplace. And like I've been saying recently, Am Yisrael Chai, whether you like it or not.
The people of Israel live whether they like it or not. Yeah. I like to say, you know, the Jewish people are God's chosen people. You like them, you don't like them, too bad, God chose them. It's the same thing.
We've been in exile for too many years,
Yeah.
and we are finally home,
Yeah.
and we're not going anyplace. And I can accept that there are people, there are Palestinians, Arabs from this region who have lived here for generations. I'm happy to live with them as good neighbors. And we can be really good neighbors. We can make peace with anybody who's willing to make peace with us. We made peace with Jordan, we made peace with Egypt, Abraham Accords. We're good at that. But the other side has to want it also. And the other side has to recognize our right to be here.
Anything else you want to add, or what gives you hope for the future?
So, my hope for the future is to see my 3 grandchildren back here playing behind my house. Unfortunately, I don't believe that their mom is going to want to come back and live here again. But you never know. It all depends on what's going on here. My hope for the future is to be sitting here talking to you and hearing the sounds of children, because they're on their daily walk with their school, with their teacher, and learning about nature and the plants, and being able to live here again in peace and security. You know, October 6th, before I went to bed, I told my son, who was visiting, that if he doesn't see me in the morning, not to worry, because I'm planning on going out in my car on my own with my camera to find this field of wild squills and take pictures of them at sunrise. That's the security that I have to have back. I have to feel safe enough driving out into the fields on my own, knowing that I'm safe.
Well, may it be soon. Yeah. Adele Raemer, thank you so much for joining us. This is an amazing place, and like you said, I look forward to coming back again soon, sitting here talking with you and seeing the other community members here.
I will bake you brownies.
Okay.
When I have my oven and my home and my mixer.
Sounds good.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.